You're listening to the Gap Podcast with your host, me, Morgan McGill. As we talk God and politics, my prayer is that you're inspired and encouraged to be a part of filling the God-sized gap in the political sphere. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, everyone, to the Gap Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan McGill, and I am very excited about today's interview. This wonderful woman has become a good friend of mine, and if anyone listening has ever been on a campaign, you'll know that you become friends, intimate friends with people really quickly in the campaign life. So we worked on a campaign together, and I just can't wait for her to tell her story because she is such an inspiring, hardworking, beautiful, from the inside out human being. And once you guys hear it, you're just going to be in shock and just as inspired as I am. So without further ado, Cynthia Kaui, welcome to the Gap.
Thank you for having me, dear friend.
Oh, it's so great to have you. I just really want to jump right into how you got to where you're at because it's so inspiring to me, and I am definitely sure it's going to inspire everyone listening. You went from just about 3 years ago to like hating politics, like despising politics. And then here you are, like just over 3 years later, the president of the San Diego Young Republicans. Like huge thing to like jump from hating to literally living politics. So I just want you to tell everyone your story. Like, how did you get to that point? What was the thing that sparked it for you?
Yeah, so I think what's even more fascinating about the genesis for politics for me was I'm actually not even a lifelong Republican. And as you shared, I hated politics before. I was not a political person at all. So that's what even makes the story even funnier.
Yeah.
But basically, I caught the bug in college, and I was in college at the time of the 2016 election with Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, and that was a very wild time to be a student. It was just a very iconic and very interesting season of life for sure. But at the time, I got encouraged by a family friend to vote, and so to be honest, that's when it all started. But I was actually a more libertarian, more center-right, more independent-minded, definitely did not like both parties at all. And then, kind of went down the rabbit hole, figuring out where I stood on the spectrum. And then basically after the 2020 election, I got activated because I was incredibly frustrated with how everything was going on in my community and the Republican Party. So I decided to be the change that I wish to see in the party and my country and my community. So basically I got involved with campaigns and the county party in January 2021, and then the rest is history.
Wow. So what was the first campaign? Who was it for you that was like, I'm gonna get behind this person? Because when you campaign, you do it like out of support for that mission and that person, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of volunteer hours. Like, even though you're getting in some cases getting paid as a campaign employee, you don't get paid that much because it's like, just like in ministry, you don't get paid too much to work for the church. It's all people's donations that is fueling the campaign. So, what was it? What campaign? Who is the person that you're like, oh, I need to get behind this person?
Totally. And I agree with all that sentiments because you're 100% accurate. It's not easy being a candidate, but more importantly, it's not easy for those that choose to volunteer or even those behind the scenes who are the staffers too. So for me, when I got started in January 2021, at the time there was a special election for the state assembly, and I know we're here in California right now, but across the nation you might know it as like the state house and things of that nature. It's basically the state legislature. So at the time there was a special election, and so that opened up a potential vacancy, and for the Republicans, that was an area of opportunity to get a good Republican potentially in there. So at the time, it was this individual named Marco Contreras, who was a good Christian man, had a beautiful family, just a really beautiful testimony, and they, worked very hard and worked very, very diligently. So he was the candidate at the time who, was the first person that I ended up helping campaign for.
I love Pastor Marco and Pastor Natalie. They are great human beings. So what was that journey like, from going to not knowing politics to going all in and helping a candidate? How did that look for you?
I was incredibly intimidated because I did not come from a family that knew anyone in politics. So for me, stepping and getting involved at first was incredibly intimidating. I would even venture as far to say, even like for myself, I'm pretty introverted, but I also know that, I'm someone that is very bubbly, and, I'm not afraid to speak to the media and the press. So I know that I have that in me. But I think even those that are more extroverted, I know at times it can be intimidating, especially, after you graduate college. You have to be a lot more intentional and more purposeful when you're trying to fellowship and trying to find and foster friendships with people, especially if you're someone that is looking to find people with similar Christian or conservative values. So I remember feeling very intimidated when I first dove into it, but I was incredibly surprised how supportive and how open people were to receiving me and being able to open doors for me and helping me to get involved. And I think especially one misconception people have, if you're a conservative Republican, you don't think that there's a place for you, but the reality is there's so much space for you to step in and make a change. Oh, yeah. More importantly, they're looking for people. So a lot of times you get blessed just because you show up. And so I think that was a very fascinating thing when I dove all in and made politics, a huge part of my life. I was incredibly fascinated with how many opportunities there were.
I love that you said a lot of times you get blessed just because you show up, because in a previous conversation that we had, I remember you saying that that's how you ended up with your job today. You worked really hard on someone's campaign, and then you ended up, and he saw how hard of a worker you were, and he was like, when he got elected, he's like, I want you on my staff. So it's true. It's just because, like, anyone listening right now, you can start from wherever, and if you show up and you're diligent, you can make a difference. I mean, you're a walking testament of that.
Oh, thank you, friend.
So from that campaign, what was the next step? Like, how did that look? That you're like, okay, I've worked on a campaign. I started going to Republican Party meetings. What was that next step for you?
So unfortunately, Marco and Natalie, they worked very hard and their campaign did great, but, unfortunately they fell short. And so, like anything, like when campaigns end, that kind of leaves you wondering, like, what's next? And that's like a very, common situation people have as soon as the election season is over. Mm-hmm. So I was in similar boats too. I knew I loved this. I wanted to continue to do it, but the election season at the time, this was 2021. So the election was in 2022. So there was a lot of time and gaps to fill in between. So I did a lot of different, like, exploring and, just networking with different nonpartisan and political organizations, one being Young Republicans, one being, business organizations as well, like in California and other states. I know they have like a Lincoln Club. So I got involved with different orgs like that and some other nonprofit organizations. But in additionally to that, what ended up happening after that was very interesting. So unfortunately, because of everything going on with the pandemic, I was one of those people that suffered because I, at the time, was working in the private sector. I knew I loved politics. And so basically what happened was I was in between two different jobs. Like, I had one job and then the pandemic hit. And then basically I got let go. And then I got back on the horse and applied and got another job. And simultaneously, I was also helping Marco campaign. And after that campaign ended, like in the summer of June 2021, I got let go from my last job in the private sector again.
Wow.
And then at that same night, I went to a Young Republicans event, and I remember telling someone who now was someone who I used to co-host a podcast with how I wanted to work in politics because I like this, but I just don't know where to go. And so fast forward, which is where we have kind of like a common connection. I applied to be a writer and producer for One America News Network, and I got the job. And it was just very interesting because, if anyone's gone through unemployment, it's just one of those things like you wouldn't know unless you're there. Like it hurts a lot, especially if you're someone that's very purposeful. You're always on the go like myself. And, when you don't have that going on with your day to day, even if it's things that are out of your control, like it really puts you in a huge depression. You wonder like what else is there? You wonder if it's you. You take it very personally. Like there's a lot to it. And so although I was very blessed and I'm grateful to the opportunity because I feel like it really propelled me to where I am now, especially in the communications and the media and press space. But, if anyone that tells you if you start out in media and press, you get like the worst shift, and that includes overnight and on your weekends.
Oh, yeah. I remember those.
Yeah. So I was working Saturdays and Sundays and overnight from 2 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So that was my full-time 40 hours a week. And for OAN is a conservative-leaning network, so I was like eating and breathing everything going on like in government and the campaign side. Because it's a national news network, I was more plugged in with what was going on federally and some statewide races.
Yeah.
So I was very grateful for that. And then basically some other additional things was I was at a fundraiser because Marco ran for Chula Vista City Council. And I was at a fundraiser and met this amazing man who is now the current Lincoln Club chairman. And he runs public affairs and public relations firm. So he wanted me to work for him. So outside of that, I was also doing consulting for him and learning all about that industry and rubbing shoulders with different donors and different kinds of great people in the city and community. And then also on the campaign side, addition to this, I got connected and met you along the way, and I joined you on the campaign space and helped a great amazing Christian woman named Amy Riker and running for San Diego supervisor. So basically during the 2022 cycle is very chaotic, but I don't even know sometimes how I even made it through. But I was working 3 different jobs. I was working 70, 80 hours a week, and half of those hours were overnight, including my weekends. But that's a little bit about what happens after Marco's campaign, my first campaign.
Friends, in over 15 years in the political sphere, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen amazing men and women forego running for office because they have no idea where to start. And on the other side of that, I can't tell you how many times I have seen amazing candidates fumble the ball so hard because they have no idea what they're doing when they decide to run for office. That is why I founded Revival Consulting. The heart of this company is to help God-fearing men and women get elected to local, state, and federal office because we see a country where the men and women in positions of political power and influence know and love God. If that's you, if you're considering running for office but you have no idea where to start or you need help, go to itsrevival.com and fill out our consultation form because we want to help you. We need your voice now more than ever. If you have seen anything that's going on in the world today, you know that you were put on this planet for such a time as this, and we need you. So please don't hesitate. Go to itsrevival.com and fill out our consultation form today. It's so funny because, like, honestly, even though you were working so many jobs, like, you still did all of them in excellence. Like, I just remember you getting so excited. Like, you were able to just do some screen tests for One America. And so that meant you were doing really well there for them to open that door for you. And then you were doing so great on Amy's campaign with me, and then you were just doing so many things, and you were doing them still in excellence, which is so shocking because usually when we pick up too many things, we start to drop balls, and To me, it's just a testament of that was what God wanted for you in that season, because he didn't let you fail. Like, you didn't drop balls. You did everything in excellence still. And that's how I knew God's hand was on what you were doing, and why that season was so great for you and propelled you now into where you're at, which is the president of the San Diego Young Republicans, and you work in the city of Chula Vista as a staffer. And so it's just so cool to see how God has worked that all together. And again, 3 years ago, you weren't even involved in politics, which I can't say because I've been involved in politics more than half of my life now, which is crazy. But yeah, it's just, I'm just so proud of you.
Oh, thank you, Fred. I really appreciate that. It's been an amazing journey. I feel very blessed.
You are. God loves you. It just is so apparent. One thing that I wanted to talk about too is your journey into the San Diego Young Republicans and how that looked, and how you ended up becoming the chairwoman of a pretty predominant organization here in San Diego.
Yeah, so basically, again, I do think it's a God thing, but the day before I was about to start my new job being a government staffer for an elected official, the former president basically had this discussion, and at their next board meeting, there was a discussion among the board, and unanimously I was voted upon, all the different members to take on being the president and chairwoman. And I just feel very blessed. Even though my day job keeps me very busy, like everything I do outside of work is really what fulfills me, is the ability to help empower more young people to get involved and to be the change they want to see in their country and their community, and also plugging into people with their interests outside of politics and creating, a space and community for people to make potential lifelong friends. Who knows, they might meet their future husband or wife at events. So, I pride myself in making our Young Republican organization in San Diego County being both a political and social organization. But even for those that are outside San Diego or California, I'm a huge believer in getting people involved and helping them to get plugged into their Young Republican organization, because it's such a great resource, especially if you're someone that feels called into politics and you're in the age range from 18 to 40.
Absolutely. I've been involved in the San Diego Young Republicans for quite some time now, and I can agree that I've met some really great friends through that organization. And even in like college, like the college Republicans, just getting involved in groups of people with like-minded people, and just start to just get around them and build community. Because when you start to, it's one of the first things. It is the first thing that God said. It is not good for man to be alone. Like it's not good for us to be alone, and it actually makes us stronger when we're together, because we realize, wow, like you said earlier, I'm not the only person. Like, I'm not, the enemy wants us to feel like we're alone and like we're isolated and we're on our own island, and that is so far from the truth. There are so many of us who care and want to get involved, and it's just, my hope is that people listening will just take that first step like you did and get involved, because in 3 years' time, you could be the president of maybe not the San Diego Young Republicans, because I feel like you'll be there for a while.
But any organization, definitely.
Exactly. So before we end this conversation, I wanted to give you space to tell people listening, to give them some words of encouragement. What would you say to someone who is in your shoes, where they didn't care about politics until now, and they're starting to wake up and they don't even know what to do, where to start?
Right. So first and foremost, there are different ways for you to get involved outside of just voting. Civic engagement goes beyond just casting your ballot every 2-4 years.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so important to be able to plant seeds and to be able to, fulfill that. And there's a lot of ways to be able to make a difference outside of just circling, the ballot and who you would want to be sitting in the House and whatnot. My first recommendation that is not intimidating at all, that I would encourage people, even if you're not political, to do is first look up who are your elected representatives.
Oh my gosh, yes, please do that.
Yes, you should know who is sitting on the school board, water, fire, planning groups, Honorable McGill.
Oh my gosh.
You should, the governor, the state assembly, Senate, supervisor, you name it. Like, you should be able to know who else is running or who is currently representing you. Mm-hmm. So that's my first step. That's something that anyone can do. You should be able to know who their first and their last names are, and be able to figure out ways to contact them, and the next step to that is, after you figure out who they are, get plugged into your local political party or system. So essentially, if you live in a municipality or an incorporated community, there's city council meetings, and in Pacific counties, there's supervisory districts. Mm-hmm. I encourage you to, at least, even if you can't attend or watch it or listen it every single week or month, at least witness it for the first time. Mm-hmm. So you at least know the format, and you at least know what's going on, the agendas, and what these elected officials are getting asked to vote on. Yeah. And so that way, you could be proactive instead of, making, a scene and being able to give public comments, which are important and they are effective. I would argue being proactive and figuring out where things on the back end, making sure that's the first step. So that's my piece of advice is, you can be civically engaged beyond voting, and it can be as less intimidating as just knowing who represents you.
Absolutely.
When they're up for re-election, if they're doing a good job, and also what's going on in your community right now, so that way you're not frustrated every 2-4 years when it's time to, elect the incumbents again, or figure out, which other candidates are stepping up to run. The other component I would recommend is, if you feel called to get involved beyond just knowing the basics, I encourage you to get plugged into your county party with their central committee, and then also get involved with other political organizations. And in particular, if you're between the ages of 18 and 40, get involved with your Young Republican organization. I am a huge believer in respecting elders and making sure that you have a seat at the table, because otherwise you'll be on the menu. But there's something to be said when you are surrounded by people with similar values in the same age range. There's something magical that happens when you are around people that are in the same synergy like you. Yeah. So that's my advice, is get plugged in, be proactive, know who's representing you, and then get involved with your county party, your Young Republican organization, and other political organizations in your community.
Absolutely. And if you're listening and you're like, I don't even know where to volunteer or who to talk to, when you get plugged into those organizations, those volunteer opportunities will come to you. There will be ample opportunity for you to get involved in different races, and different opportunities for you to get involved in just even speaking at a school board meeting or something like that, that there will be opportunities for you, that you don't have to go seek them and be overwhelmed by that. Just by plugging yourself into a community with like-minded people will do that for you. And I think that's fantastic advice. Also, please know your representatives. That's it seems so elementary, but it's not. There are, I would say, 80 to 90% of the people in the country don't know who their local representatives are, and it's kind of crazy. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah. And then, I'm sorry, one last thing
absolutely.
I don't want people to walk away listening from this podcast and be intimidated by me, especially, if they get to know me one-on-one. Not intimidating at all, very friendly, approachable, and accessible. But yes. I don't want people to walk away feeling like, having government or politics be there, everything like me, because I'm like the conservative Leslie. No, you don't have to be like that at all. There's levels to your involvement in politics, because I know you have a beautiful testimony, and you inspire me so much because of how civically engaged you've been at such a young age. I'm getting involved now, so I can catch up to your level. But there's levels to your involvement. You can either be a volunteer, you can choose to eventually maybe do political consulting or be an operative. You can be a government staffer eventually, or, you know, maybe someday you want to run your own YR or county party someday. There's levels to involvement, both volunteer and on a paid basis. So my recommendation is just dive in, figure out what you like and don't like, and then figure out, you know, the best step of action for you. But I don't want people to get involved, feel intimidated, and wonder where their place is, because there's levels of how much you want to be involved in politics and what boundaries you can set.
Yeah, and even you don't even have to necessarily be like actively involved. If you're in business and your calling is to make a lot of money, donate. Find people that you support and donate. Max out to those campaigns, because they need it. It's actually really hard to raise money. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, totally.
So thank you. I can't thank you enough for how inspiring you are, and how much of a hard worker you are. It really shows. And I can't wait to see if just you've done all this in just 3 years, what God's gonna do in 30 years. Like your career. I mean, Cynthia Kaui for president after me, for sure.
We'll take turns.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to have you on in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to share it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. Now go out in the world and make disciples. We'll catch you in the next one.